arts and science students don't like beards. It's been made clear to me before. I would also suggest that my esteemed chair, who called me a wannabe scientist, which really hurts, actually, also is himself an artist. I think we can accept on some level by virtue of chairing a department in the humanities, who had the incredible lapse in judgment to grant me tenure early, beard and all.
I believe you were hairless at one point.
Not when I got tenure, my friend. It was, hang on a minute. I found myself twitching in my seat when my esteemed colleague brought up the notion of Tesla going crazy. Tesla certainly was a dynamic and brilliant scientist, and I think we can treat the benefits of his work as having significant empirical value. And I thought, man, it would take us all year to list all the crazies over in the arts. And Van Gogh came to mind, and then I thought, well, yes, maybe he did shoot himself because he came to a grasp of reality. I find that implausible somehow. But at the same time, sorry. I find myself carefully wanting to imagine something like as it might be this chair, which has a curiously ugly plastic aesthetic symmetry to it, but at the same time is very similar, I suspect, to all the chairs in this room that you are sitting on, with a degree of comfort and confidence that the legs will not collapse underneath you. I would like you to imagine what that chair might look like had it been rendered by Vincent van Gogh, either he of the 2 ears or of the 1 ear. And think about whether you would like to sit on said chair. That's step 1. Now, I would like you to imagine 2 chairs building off of this point. This chair was built by an engineer. This chair was also built by an engineer, or designed by an engineer. This chair was built by an artist and someone in the humanities. I would like you to pick which of these 3 seats you might feel compelled to sit on. Whereas the scientist will, granted on some level, construct an element of reality, the humanist will deconstruct a reality that wasn't there in the first place. This is important to keep in mind, because I have no interest. Any arts and science and humanities double majors here? Show of hands. I never want to walk on a bridge that you built. Because it won't be there. And if it is there, it's going to fall down because you haven't thought about how to build the damn bridge. Someone in the sciences will build that bridge, will think about structure, will think about design, will think about its reliability. We'll put it in place and in time and give it a palpable, tangible reality.
Like that one that fell down when the wind blew too hard.
There were wannabe scientists involved in the construction of that one. I was there, and as a historian, I learned about it. So, I'm incredibly sorry, actually. I'm actually hurt by the beginnings of these personal attacks, because I thought we really had a rich intellectual debate to be had here. If I could borrow your pen for just a second, Chris, if I may, thank you. I'm just going to make a note to myself and write down Harrison's 3BB3 grade.
Sucker, I'm not in that.
2011.
So now I just won't say it.
Thank you. I'll stop there, but I really, again, in the spirit of intellectual endeavor, which maybe is the domain of the scientist and not the riprap in the humanities, I would stop there and take the higher ground, which is, oh yes, a real and true place.
Thank you for your rebuttal. Are there any closing remarks on the opposition side?
We're already at close. We got tons to talk about. All right.
Well, you can keep
Talk about whatever. Chris, why don't you take it down a peg with your mad intellectual skills? Maybe I'll take it down a peg. I need to do it in a much cooler way.
Okay, so this is just building off one of Harrison's points earlier. He talked a lot about Nikola Tesla, who was undoubtedly one of the greatest minds we've seen, or at least so the scientists say. So I'm going to talk about another one, who I'm sure we've all heard of, Isaac Newton. Now, one of the things that always struck me about Newton, something that seems to come up a lot in his teachings, is that famous quote of his that he said, when he said that, if I appear great and if I've made great discoveries, it's only because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. That's interesting because, and I'm hoping this isn't news to anyone, giants don't exist. And they never have. And the fact that we, as a civilization, have continued to build a society on this man's principles is clearly a disturbing lack of faith that we have in what is the true reality. Now, another point. This should be an easy question. How many moons does the Earth have?
One.
2.
Thank you.
Yes.
2 is the correct answer. As discovered in 1994, the Earth has a second moon called Cruikshank. It is 3 miles across and orbits the Earth every 770 years. Now, despite this discovery and despite the fact that it is now considered scientific knowledge, and common scientific knowledge even, in that domain, why is it still called the moon? What is wrong with these people? And why is there this perversion of numbers, which, as my partner established, is the only thing that is both real and even practical about this discipline? Now, where am I going with this? All right. Yeah, speaking of math, this is another famous person I hope you've all heard of. Pythagoras. Now, there's been a lot of stuff that's come up in his publications. Thanks to my musings with a few of you, you've helped push me in the right direction. Now, I dug a little bit further, and among the secret society that Pythagoras created that was quite affluent, quite successful, there were a lot of norms that these people had to live by. One of the norms I found most interesting was rule number 4, you cannot break bread. Rule number 10 was you cannot eat bread whole. How do you eat bread? I think this is overshadowed by a much bigger problem. Pythagoras was well known, and he insisted that his followers take it too. They had an aversion to beans. They were terrified of beans. They refused to eat them, and Pythagoras even refused to touch them. Now, the reasons for this are still unclear. One of the most popular reasons is because the Greeks Pythagoras included believed that they looked like human genitalia, and therefore refused to eat them because it was theorized that they were made of the same parts as people, and therefore they have the propensity to like yada, yada, yada. Now, I'm not familiar with what type of beans grow in Greece, but I've yet to hear of anyone who has long, green genitalia. Now,
And that would be empirical evidence.
okay, now I was actually going somewhere with this. Now this is really interesting. There's a lot of theories about how Pythagoras died. Nobody really knows. He was alive, he lived a good old age, but he was murdered. But nobody really seems to know how. But the legend that's persisted, and that seems to be most maintained by historians, mathematicians alike, is the following story. His enemies showed up to his house. They set it on fire. As an old man, he had to hobble out of his home and somewhere in safety. But because they burnt it from a specific side, he had nowhere to run but a bean field. Leaving the back door of his house with a cane, hobbling, he stood before a bean field and stopped dead. And he thought to himself and is said to have declared aloud, I would rather die than enter this bean field.